Hello and welcome to part 4 of our series on Tekken 7 Basics. We are steaming right along, but another reminder that the written version of this guide is completed, so if you're looking for more information and don't want to wait for the next videos, take a look at the video description below to find a link to that. I've also once again included a link to a Tekken glossary and jargon list in case you need to use that for reference at any point. So let's get going. Walls are important in Tekken for a variety of reasons. They can boost or limit your combo damage, they can provide positional advantage, which impacts meta, and they can add or diminish the utility of a move, among other things. If you're not at least trying to optimize your wall situations, then you're going to leave a ton of damage and wins on the table. So let's start with the easy stuff, head-on wall splats. There are two ways to get this. First, you can hit your opponent with a move that has the ability to splat them from standing. Note the phrasing here. Not all moves can do this. In fact, most can't. You might also need a special condition for the move to splat, like a counter hit. Regardless, it's worth your time to go through your character's move list to identify which moves splat and how. There are many moves that give far more reward at the wall because they have the ability to splat. Second, you can get a splat from a juggle. With the wall involved, mid-juggle attacks will either give some kind of wall splat or they will slam the opponent to the ground somehow. Most air throws, for example, slam. But moves vary greatly in the kind of splat that you can get. This is important because, in general, the higher up your opponent is on the wall, the better wall combo you can get. So it benefits you to find moves that A, carry your opponent the farthest, and B, float your opponent the highest. It is extremely common for a character to have multiple wall carry options depending on the distance you need to carry your opponent. In either case, hit animation plays a big role here as well. How far out a move can wall splat will determine its utility as you approach the wall. Even if you don't or can't get a wall splat, you may still benefit from trying to get your opponent closer to the wall due to the positional advantage you gain. We will discuss Oki more in a later section, but for now be mindful of how your wake up and neutral options change when at the wall. For instance, maybe you have a good move that gets better because your opponent can no longer get away when it hits because the wall stops them. Or maybe you have a move that doesn't track so well to one side, so it will benefit you if your opponent can't sidestep that way because the wall blocks them. You should be mindful of this restricted movement for yourself as well. If a wall is at your back, then backdashing won't do much. And as we just said, sidestepping might also have little to no effect if you're trying to step into the wall. On the other hand, this is a good situation to discover moves you have that switch sides. For example, many grabs will side switch even if your opponent breaks it. Characters also have a wall jump performed back, up, back, no attack input necessary here. Wall jump animations are unique to a character, so mess around with your characters to see what kind of properties it has. Next, we need to discuss awkward wall angles. You will notice that if a character hits the wall at an angle, you may get a weird splat. In some instances, this will cut the follow-up short because the impacted character is twisted in a way that either doesn't allow a full follow-up or causes them to fall too fast to get any follow-up. The most common example is when you are doing a juggle and they hit the wall from the side. But you'll notice that if you hit someone in the back so that their face smashes into the wall, you'll get a similarly goofy situation. There are still follow-ups to all of these scenarios, but part of optimizing your reward and being able to defend is to get as much experience as possible so that you can gauge better how the wall is going to affect the situation. In addition, walls offer opportunities to get more reward against blocking opponents for certain moves. We mentioned before that there are specific situations where you can damage a blocking opponent. This is one of them. Many rage drives have the ability to shove your opponent into the wall, a perfect example being Paul's quarter circle forward 1+2. The shove causes a minor amount of damage when the opponent contacts the wall, and it gives additional frame advantage. A non-rage example would be Steve's sway throw that pushes into the wall. It's a grab and can be broken just like any other grab, and it doesn't do any damage on its own, but when at the wall, it will shove the opponent into the wall, which stuns the opponent enough that he can get a guaranteed follow-up that will wall splat. It's extremely important to be aware of these moves. Walls are one of the trickiest parts of Tekken due to the somewhat random nature of them. The walls may not be technically random, but you will run into many situations in which you do not get the wall interaction you were expecting, or even worse, the wall prevents you from doing the damage you were trying to do. We will be talking more about walls later as well when we get to stage gimmicks, aka wall and floor breaks. The concept of spacing is a rather big one, so we'll save in-depth discussion for an intermediate guide, but for now it's very important to understand how important spacing and related concepts are in a game like Tekken. Let's discuss range first. Note that we're talking lateral range here, not the low, mid, high properties. Thanks to the new frame data tool Namco has given us, we can actually see exactly the distance between characters in any given situation. To understand this number, it's important to know that each unit of distance corresponds to roughly a character length. So if you are at a range 2, then you are roughly 2 character lengths away. But because Tekken is a 3D game, not only must you consider the lateral distance from your opponent, you must also consider your angle. For example, Akuma's fireball is essentially a full screen move, but it doesn't matter so long as you sidestep it. It will never hit you if you're off axis. Similarly, even a move that tracks may have different ranges at different angles due to uneven hitboxes. This principle doesn't just apply to horizontal angles, it also applies to vertical angles. For instance, if you sidestep and then duck, a tracking mid might still miss you when it would otherwise hit you standing. On that note, we must clarify how tracking works. The only moves that are guaranteed to hit your opponent at any angle, subject to range of course, are homing moves. They literally will follow your opponent like a guided missile. In essence, we can say that these moves have 360-degree hitboxes. Everything else is simply a matter of advantageous hitboxes. This means simply that if a move has good tracking to a particular side, then it has hitboxes that extend well to that side. That's it. There's still no guarantee. The last aspect that we'll discuss about spacing for now involves pushback. You've probably noticed by now that many moves, if not most, leave your opponent at a different range depending on whether the move hits or not. Generally, assuming a knockdown isn't involved, a move will push the opponent farther away on block than on hit. This is useful because pushback can often translate into safety. Brian's 3+4 is a perfect example of this. It's -13 on block, but due to the pushback, only a couple of moves in the game can reach him that quickly at that distance in order to punish him. However, you can also use pushback in more subtle ways. For example, Craig's down 1+2 is -12 on block, but many players prefer to use their 10-frame jab punisher in these situations. Craig's down 1+2 has just enough pushback that many characters' jabs will actually whiff. So if the Craig player identifies this tendency, he can bait a jab, duck it, and then punish back. This is all due to just a tiny bit of pushback. Due to all these variables, Tekken is a game of experimentation and feel. In a 3D game, the spacing of hitboxes are impossible to gauge 100% of the time because A, we can't see them, B, they're almost always uneven, and C, players are constantly moving around. This is why scrambles can happen so easily when something clips off axis when we think it shouldn't, or vice versa. This is also why Tekken is so exciting. You never know when someone will mess up their spacing, or you get weird pushback or the like. Throws and grapples come in a lot of varieties in Tekken, but we'll start with the basics that apply to the vast majority of throws. First, once you input a throw, it has a startup just like any other move. The typical grab has an I-12 startup and is considered a high for defensive purposes. The primary difference between a hit and a grab, of course, is that a grab cannot be blocked. Instead, after a throw connects, you have roughly 20 frames to input the correct break for the grab. If you successfully break a grab, you go through a special break animation and you continue the match as normal without taking any damage. If you don't break the grab, it'll go through an animation that will do damage and typically leave you on the ground. As you might expect, with over 30 frames for the total interaction, it is reasonable with practice to be able to react to essentially all grabs. To do this, it's important to understand how grab breaks work. From neutral, a grab can be one of 3 break types: 1, 2, or 1+2. Every character in the game has 4 basic grabs: 1+3, 2+4, and their longer range counterparts, forward 1+3 and forward 2+4. The longer range grabs also have much better tracking, although they are much slower with I-15 startups. It's important to keep in mind that all 4 of the basic grabs can be broken by pressing either 1 or 2. Any non-basic grab is referred to as a command grab and will have only one valid break option. For instance, Paul's 2+4 back is a command 2 grab because you must press 2 and only 2 to break it. In general, the punch button that is involved in the throw input determines the break. In the previous example, the punch button used is 2, therefore it requires a 2 break. Paul's forward 1+2 uses both punches, therefore it is a 1+2 break. Command throws also tend to have slightly faster startups. Craig's quarter circle back 1+2 is I-10, for example. In order to react to a grab, you must learn to see which hand your opponent throws out. For a 1 break, the character will lead heavily with their left hand. For a 2 break, their right hand, and for a 1+2 break, the hands will be roughly even. It takes time to recognize these animations, so you'll need to use practice mode or play against someone who grabs a lot. Now we can talk about the fun exceptions. First, throws that connect to an opponent's back cannot be broken, although they can still be ducked. Second, if a throw connects to an opponent's side, the side of the character determines the break. For instance, if I land a grab to my opponent's right side, then the grab break is 2, i.e. the right punch. Note also that side grabs have smaller break windows, so they are harder to break in that respect. Both back and side throws can be ducked, of course, assuming you're not recovering from something. What's neat about them is that they have their own unique animations and characteristics. It doesn't matter whether you use a basic or command throw, if it hits in the side or back, it will always do the same unique side or back throw. Air throws, ground throws, and crouch throws also have quirky characteristics. Note that not all characters have these, and those that do don't necessarily have all 3. Lars, for example, has an air throw, but no crouch or ground throws. Air throws, as you can guess, allow you to throw your opponent while they're floated, similar to any other move you might use in a juggle. Consequently, it should not surprise you that air throws cannot be broken. On the other hand, ground and crouch throws can be broken. However, unlike a normal throw, the startup animation is the same regardless which throw is being used, so the break is a true guess. You can still react to the grab, but you won't know for sure which grab it is until after the break window. They also only have 1 and 2 break varieties, so it's a 50-50. There are no 1+2 breaks here. Chain throws are similar in that only a few characters have them, and the initial throw is typically a true 50-50 break between 1 and 2. After that, like the name implies, the character can continue inputting additional throws, each with their own separate break. The idea is that each point in the chain path does relatively low damage, but continues to stack. The defender luckily keeps getting opportunities to break each point in the chain. There are of course rare exceptions, so keep that in mind as you continue to learn about each character. Tackles also come in a couple varieties. The ultimate tackle is a knockdown mount that almost every character has. It's usually performed by pressing 1+2 while crouching, but you can also get it with other inputs. For instance, after running only a couple of steps, you will get this tackle instead of the universal armored shoulder, which requires a couple more running steps. You can break this tackle with 1+2. The window is quite generous, and if you break it late, you can actually reverse it and end up on top. Once in the mount, there are a sequence of punches you can do, and many characters have their own unique options. As always, there are a bunch of exceptions to the rule. Marduk, in fact, has his own unique and more powerful version that is viewed as a standalone stance. Overall, grabs and tackles come in a variety of forms, and each character has their own versions. For instance, not all characters have a command 1 or 2 grab, and some grabs are unbreakable, and so on. This is one of those things you have to lab to have an idea of what a character can throw at you. Thanks for watching part 4. Again, we hope you enjoyed it and hope it was helpful if you're a newer player. As mentioned, reminder that the full written guide is already completed and you can find the link in the description below. We still have a couple of videos left to go, however you can obviously use the written guide to jump ahead if you don't wish to wait until the remaining videos are finished. As always, we hope you'll give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. I also do as much streaming as I possibly can, so you can find my Twitch link below as well. I also have links to Twitter and Facebook there that you can find. If you really like the channel content, please also consider supporting us on Patreon. That's the absolute best way to support your favorite content creators. With that, we will see you all for part 5. Have a good day and stay safe.